There is a lot riding on Donkey Kong Bonanza. There's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about here. The game itself is an insane blend of what I came to think of as a mix of Hulk Ultimate Destruction from 2005. And shout out if you remember that game, Radical Entertainment's open world smash 'em up game where you could rip police cars in half and use them as boxing gloves. That game mixed with Mario Odyssey, 2017's Mario Odyssey. I do have more to talk about because there's so much that I'm excited about with this game. But before then, over to Josh to talk about NordVPN.
Want to stay safe online and save big? Well, you can. Right now, you can get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card. And all you've got to do is click the link in the description below or on this QR code that should be right down here in this video to get signed up with this great deal right now.
Now, DK Bananza is developed by the Mario Odyssey team. Apparently, internally, there was a Nintendo executive. I did write the dude's name down. Yoshiaki Koizumi, who apparently, he was the director on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat way back in 2004. And apparently internally inside Nintendo, he was like, look, we only have a certain amount of characters that we keep going back to, assumedly the likes of, the Marios, the Kirbys or whatever. And we haven't done a Nintendo developed Donkey Kong game since 2004, since Jungle Beat, because most of the Donkey Kong games are developed by Retro Studios. DK64 was Rare back in the day, back in the 90s. And it's long time that Nintendo had a go at making sure that Donkey Kong is as recognizable gameplay-wise as a Mario game or a Kirby game or, like a Splatoon or something like that, which is really interesting because obviously DK is incredibly well known, supremely iconic, immediately identifiable, etc., and has been part of gaming history for like 40 years at this point. But we don't have a seminal Donkey Kong game, at least in the 3D space. We have Donkey Kong Country or whatever to point at. We haven't got a 3D game, and we haven't had anything from the last 20 odd years to point to and be like, this is an essential game. So it's kind of interesting. The main thing that I want to get across here is that idea of Nintendo themselves re-grappling with Donkey Kong, with the character, with the abilities that he has, and then ostensibly transforming him gameplay-wise into what I feel is pretty much the Hulk. Like, dude is just unbelievably strong, unbelievably capable in this game. The whole story is very little story, as there hardly ever is in Nintendo games, but the general structure here is just Donkey Kong, all of him and all the other apes or whatever are working in this mine, and then these evil dudes come along called Voidco, and then they steal all the bananas, they steal all the processes, the different ways that everyone is doing their jobs and working through this mine, trying to find bananas, trying to find gold, etc. And then they just mine all the way down through the planet, and you end up giving chase. You're sort of trying to do your best with this accompanying rock character that's on your shoulder, which Nintendo then revealed is Pauline, is a child version of Pauline, the character that was also seen in Mario Odyssey, and who you can play as in the most recent Mario Kart as well. And then once it becomes Donkey Kong and Pauline teaming up together, they just have to go level by level, lower and lower and lower through the planet core to try and have a wish fulfilled. The rumor is that if you get to the planet core, you can have a wish fulfilled. Pauline's trying to get back to the surface. Donkey Kong's just trying to do right by everybody in terms of his fellow apes and in terms of Pauline themselves. But still, that then lends weight to the gameplay just being absolute all-out destruction. They obviously showed quite a lot of this stuff pre-release, but it's not until you get your hands on the game that you realize just how many gameplay loops they've effortlessly combined. Like the fact that you are just punching right through every single part of the environment, even down to the controls themselves, which feel, like I said, they are distinct from a Mario, from a Kirby, or whoever. You are using the top face button X to punch directly upwards. You're using B to punch downwards. You can punch straight forward as well. But they want you to be thinking about the full 3D space that's on offer and, punching your way through every part of the environment to uncover hidden bananas, hidden gems, hidden Banandium coins that will then get you skill upgrades and things like that. And it does create this relentless pace to the game. Donkey Kong automatically climbs any surface that you point him at. There's a couple that he can't get on, but the vast majority, dude's just up there. You're punching through, you're grabbing the coins. You have to hit R to do a clap, like a Hulk style clap. Which will then hoover up any gold or objects that are around you. So it becomes this really infectious, immediate, and super addictive mix of 3D platforming. There are some mini games in here, different ways of getting around the open world, and then bits and pieces of the combat where you can pick up a bit of terrain and just smash it over an enemy. Or maybe you punch apart one of the enemies and grab a piece of them and throw that at the next guy. It's really, really super fluid. And obviously it takes full advantage of the Switch too. The game looks absolutely gorgeous and moves incredibly well as well. I haven't had a single frame rate hiccup or anything like that. The only thing I've got in regards to a graphical glitch or a presentational glitch is that sometimes you can see the next area loading in if you're moving around quite fast, which I play quite fast in this. You know, you can hit the left trigger to roll as well. So it's like you're punching, you're hoovering up, you're rolling somewhere, you're grabbing a piece of turf, you're smashing a guy, you're grabbing a bit of metal, and then you're surfing that to the next area. And once I was rolling all those things together, there was one bit where I was trying to go through like a tunnel, and the area on the next side was just a brown screen. It hadn't like fully loaded yet. Took a split second, but still, if I'm being completely honest about performance stuff, I did see that. Overall though, I think that is the takeaway thing here, is that Nintendo really want to push Donkey Kong, you know, more than ever. Like you've seen in the real world, you know, the Donkey Kong expansion to the Nintendo theme park, you know, that thing led with Mario Karts and, you know, Bowser's Castle. And even the Pikmin, you could go and find them in real life. They were hidden around the park, which I did when I visited the park in Japan. But it's the Donkey Kong expansion that is the recent expansion to the park. You're also getting, you know, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD was released a few months ago. That game was put on sale to try and get it in front of more people. You know, Donkey Kong overall, like I said, 20 years worth of games. Most of them across the 2000s are the Jungle Beat games, where they came with the bongos, and people remember that stuff from the GameCube. And it's taken this long to go, okay, what can the character actually do? What should their moveset be? How do we make Donkey Kong distinct from Mario? And what should that gameplay loop feel like? Which also, it's worth throwing in that I've noticed this, you know, the way that Mario games are constructed, where you have sort of semi-open world spaces, and then you would leap into the levels, like Mario 64 style. You know, in 64, you jump through the paintings, you end up in a level, you're trying to find a star, and then you beam back to the overworld, and you just go back in again. Obviously, all the other Marios have done that since. Odyssey having some of the biggest spaces possible, but still having the collectathon kind of approach. But still, that idea of having an overworld and then smaller spaces that you can beam into. I thought that was really cool when Zelda started doing that in Breath of the Wild and in Tears of the Kingdom, in terms of the shrines. Because to me, that speaks to a maturing, aging gamer demographic. They are very aware on Nintendo's side that their go-to, you know, the average gamer is like 34 if you go across all the spectrums. And most of us have families or less time to play than we once did. And we just want to beam into something, play something for like 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, feel that satisfaction, and then move on. And if you want to spend more time and you have more time, you can do more of the shrines in Zelda's case, you can hoover up more of the stars, or in Donkey Kong's case, you can do more of the tucked away combat challenges and mini games and things like that. This has the same approach that the two most recent Zeldas had and that Mario's had for a good long while, which I really appreciate. As a dad, as someone who doesn't have as much time to game anymore, I think that's a worthwhile thing to have in there. And for as much as you are exploring these open world spaces and punching your way through everything and constantly collecting and hoovering up all these different gems and powering up Donkey Kong and unlocking new skills, you also have these other bits of the environment that you can unlock and then jump in there and do a combat challenge and, you know, do like a puzzle or something where you've got to try and figure out like, okay, how do I get to the top of this environment? You know, I can punch through certain parts of the materials that are here, which makes this move, and I can jump on this, I can ride this thing or whatever. I think that is another worthwhile component to what is a Donkey Kong game in 2025 and what a Donkey Kong game could be going forward. In terms of difficulty, it is worth saying that Bananza is incredibly easy. You know, this is going to be a lot of people, and especially children, they'll be their first Nintendo game. Like if they've just got a Switch 2, obviously the Switch 2 sold incredibly well. If they've hoovered up Mario Kart World and they've been enjoying that for the last month or so, chances are DK Bananza is going to be the go-to, you know, it's a 3D platformer. It's one of the most accessible genres in gaming and one of my personal favorites. And you're getting through Bananza, there's really not any challenge to it at all. And then you can say, well, it's a Nintendo game, what were you expecting? Fair enough. However, there are clearly past examples of incredibly hard Nintendo games and in the platforming space, specifically the ones in the 90s, and even Mario Odyssey, you know, had incredibly hard, the moons to get. And when you were fighting the creatures at the end of that game, if you kept going back to them, you would get a harder and harder boss battle there. The boss battles in DK Bananza are just supremely easy. They're over in like 20 seconds. Like, you know, you're fighting something where destruction does play a part of it. Like maybe you're bashing away at like a limb, you're trying to knock them off balance. Maybe you're grabbing a part of the environment and throwing it into maybe a club that they're coming at you with. You're blowing that thing up, creating a weak spot, and then just wailing on the dude and have a little life bar that goes away. But every single boss I have done first time, I have done in seconds. It has been super, super easy. So to that end, you know, you are getting a very well playing, very fun, very destruction heavy experience, but do not expect challenge because it is not here. The nearest thing to challenge is some of those cutaway levels, like some of the puzzles that you've got to figure out, but even then didn't take you very long. Some of the combat encounters, things like that. There are more mini games. There are certain layers to the game, like in terms of the sub layers that you go down as you get deeper and deeper through the environments that I can't talk about because of embargoes. But even then, for as much as they were providing a varied challenge without detailing what you're doing down there, I still, obviously, there's no part of this where I was like, this is hard, or I need to try again, or whatever. The only times I died were when I accidentally punched through a wall and then I fell off the end of one of the levels, you know, in one of the puzzle levels or something. Those are the only things that really provided anything of an obstacle. And you can buy, in Donkey Kong fashion, you can buy the red balloons that will float you back up onto the environment. And those are super easy to come by just because of how much gold you're hoovering up the entire time anyway. So super easy game on that front. And environmentally, you know, graphically, presentation-wise, absolutely stunning. Like, obviously, this game is built to show off the Switch 2. And you do have everything from, you know, Donkey Kong's fur textures, different ways that you can customize him and his outfits, different material detail, depending on what you're putting on him and Pauline, to the environments themselves that have a lot of really gorgeous lighting effects to show off the Switch 2's built-in HDR, even if you're in the handheld mode. The whole thing with this is that even though we are underground, there are still, you know, snowy levels, tropical levels, industrial levels, factories, things like that. It still looks like the sun is setting. It's still, you know, they've just kind of gone, how do we do a series of incredibly detailed biomes and just say that they're underground? You know, the idea being that even when you're getting, you know, so far underground that who knows what's down there, and then who knows what you can find it and go from there. Which brings me a little bit onto, you know, it's worth mentioning a slight negative. I do think that the game overall, it's not that it's one note, because there are other things in there. Like I said, destruction and all-out exploration is the main drive and the main thing you're doing. And when that thing clicks, like I said, the pace of gameplay, it's like Mario on speed. Like, it's absolutely flying, and you're bringing so much in. You're hoovering up the bananas, you're unlocking stuff. You can fly through the game. And when you do the clap thing, there is like a sonar pulse that'll show you like, hey, you're actually close to maybe a banana that's like behind one of the hills or one of the tokens that you can collect. So you end up factoring that in. That destruction first gameplay, you know, when you end up doing big stints of it and you don't happen upon one of the hidden, you know, challenges, or you don't happen upon something like being fired between the barrels, or jumping in a minecart and things like that, it can be a bit like, okay, this is all this is kind of thing, is I'm just punching my way through the environment, hoovering stuff up, unlocking stuff over and over and over again. And to that end, you know, it's over to you whether you think that's a negative or not. If you're doing long stints of the game, then you are aware that you are just doing the same thing for a couple of hours, for 3 hours. Now, again, that's part of that conversation on, are they building an experience for someone who isn't necessarily going to be playing this in massive stints? Younger gamers will be able to, but, you know, someone like me, like I said, who has a family and everything else, and a kid, I'm just not going to be able to dedicate that much time. But that did still work in my favor, because I could leap in and play an hour of the game or half an hour or whatever and still have a satisfying experience. I think it's interesting. I think it's just a wider conversation on, how do we want our games to be built? Do we want piecemeal, you know, different smaller sections of games that are still very satisfying, or are we looking for those big immersive experiences? And the gaming industry can give you both. You know, this is coming out within weeks of Death Stranding 2, which is very much a sit down and take it in kind of game. But I quite like the casual nature of giving you worthwhile gameplay sections, whether that is a 10-minute chunk or a half an hour chunk or whatever. And then the variety is just in there, providing you explore enough to find it. Because it is worth saying that you do need to explore to find these other parts of the environments. It's super easy to just punch through, go straight to checkpoint, go to the next marker on the screen, do the next story conversation with an NPC, and go to the next sublayer and the next sublayer, you know, fighting the bosses as you go. It's way more worth exploring, finding the other bananas, finding the combat challenges, finding the variety that's in there. And that's how I've enjoyed it so much. I will throw in as well that the dynamic between Donkey Kong and Pauline is awesome. Like I really like the way that they write Pauline. Like she's a bit nervous about singing. She kind of wants she's at the beginning of the game she's stuck as just being a rock. There's a whole thing with her. But I do think it becomes very endearing, and it is almost like Nintendo's spin on King Kong or something. And you get that sort of companion character vibe that I think again a lot of games have gone for, whether it's Kratos and Atreus, or even like Nathan Drake and Elena in Uncharted 4, like or Bowser and Bowser Jr., things like that. Like you do get that companion vibe, which is awesome. The two of you on the adventure together. Pauline's very happy to join in. You can play 2-player where someone can control Pauline's voice, doing more damage and affecting the environment as well. It's super immediate. You are dressing both characters up. You can change the color of DK's fur. You can give Pauline different costumes. It's a very, very fun approach. And the music that's in the game, the themes that play when you transform, which is the whole thing I should talk about, are super infectious and remind me a bit of the soundtrack of Splatoon, like that sort of like sort of J-pop vibe where it's just super energetic. They want you to be having fun as much as possible. The transformations, you unlock them super early. Well, you unlock one of them super early, which they have already shown off. Nintendo have put them in the trailers. But once Pauline breaks out of being a rock and is able to sing more, then Donkey Kong can bang the hell out of his chest and transform into Kong Bananza, which is like a way more over-the-top, almost mutant-looking version of himself that can just punch through different parts of the environment faster than ever. You can do a few other abilities as well when you're transformed, but for the most part, it's a damage boost. It's an environmental boost. You do unlock, and again, they've shown them in the trailers. There's a zebra one, there's an ostrich one. The ostrich one unlocks the ability to glide around the environments as well, which lends weight to that general ethos of how do we maximize the 3D space? How do we make it so you're enjoying your time taking in a 3D space, and then thinking like, okay, I'm going to punch through that mountain over there and see what's there. And there is always something there. One of the skills that you can unlock is the ability to spawn treasure chests. There's a percentage chance that a treasure chest will drop. So even if you're just punching through anything, you'll still be getting gold. You'll still be getting some currency that you can then trade in for different items, whether those are, life restoring red balloons, or you'll hopefully be finding the fossils that unlock different costume parts so you can swim faster or whatever. Overall, the general word of the day is propulsion. I think that's the general thing that they want to associate with Donkey Kong. It is punching, it's climbing, it's unlocking stuff and being, feeling like you're being rewarded constantly. And Nintendo already showed this off, but you can level entire environments. The currencies that you're unlocking only work for the level that you're on. So you're encouraged to find everything on a given sub-layer before you drop down to the next one, which is fun. It does mean that none of other than the main gold currency, that carries over, but the fossils, the Banandium stuff, like those other tokens, they don't carry between levels. So you are encouraged to get as much out of the level that you're on as possible before moving on. One last thing I want to throw in is just the coolness of the Donkey Kong rap being in here. I'll not tell you where it is because it won't take you very long to hear it, but it's cool that the DK rap is in there. It should have been in the Mario movie more. The whole thing with Grant Kirkhope, making the DK rap back in the 90s. It took him like 5 minutes or something by his own accord. And then not really being credited for it. And hopefully that stuff works out more the more that Donkey Kong is brought to the fore and the more that the DK rap is shown off, because that's a fun piece of music. But yeah, the DK rap is in here. Also, whenever you rest in the game, whenever you go to sleep in the game, they play like a lullaby version of the main DK theme from the start of the Super Nintendo, which is another just cool little nod to like the identifiable nature of Donkey Kong's overall footprint over the last 30, 40 years or so. If you've been with Nintendo for for decades, it's just being reminded of like, okay, they know what they're doing, they know what they're pulling from, they know the memories they're connoting with this character, and he's been here all along, just not with as confident a foot forward as we now have with Bananza. Overall, I super enjoyed my time with the game. I think it is worth flagging that potential one-note nature of it if you're doing longer stints, but the amount of gameplay systems that are here, the fluidity with which they're handled, the frame rate, the performance, the immediacy of the whole thing, there is a real addictive quality to what they have here. And above all, the mission statement was to highlight Donkey Kong and make him distinct from the Marios, the Kirbys, the Zeldas, the Splatoons, the Splatoon kids. I think they've knocked that out the park. Like that idea of what a Donkey Kong game can be, when the only other former template in the 3D space was DK64. Now we have this really great framework that Nintendo can take and go forward and can apply to all sorts of different things, whether they are puzzle-based levels, or different mini games, things like that. That idea of punching through part of the environment so you can affect something else, and having it all be physics-based as well is really, really cool. So I was thoroughly impressed by this. If you're looking for something to show off what a Switch 2 can do, it is very much this. So yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Copies of DK Bananza have leaked apparently online, so some of you might already have a copy of the game, but I think it's going to be fascinating watching the conversation on this. Now we have Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza as two major first-party titles for the Switch 2, how they're going to be handled, what people think of the Donkey Kong gameplay, what we can now talk about as 3D Donkey Kong gameplay in the modern day. That in itself is super, super exciting to talk about. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you very soon.